Hello, I'm Frederick Noad, and over the next hour or so, I'm going to guide you through the principles of how music is written so that you can become a fluent reader by following a series of straightforward steps. Our program is divided into sections, and here is an index of these to help you find your way around. First, pitch, that's how high or low a note is. Duration, how long the notes last. Rests and ties. Then we're going to play some familiar tunes. After that, we'll study some new time signatures, then deal with sharps and flats, that's the black notes on the keyboard, and then chords and counterpoint, which will lead us to reading and playing both hands together. Before we start, let me make a few suggestions that will speed up your progress. If at all possible, arrange that you can see the screen while sitting at your keyboard. Then if I ask you to play something, you'll be able to do it on the spot. Always try to associate an action with theoretical information. If you're learning the names of the notes, play them at the same time. The actions help enormously in the process of memorization and learning. Now, don't hesitate to repeat individual sections over and over again if necessary. The great advantage of this type of instruction is that a large amount of information can be condensed into an hour's program. But obviously, it takes much more than an hour to assimilate all the information, hence the need for repeats. So, that's enough preliminary talk. Let's get to work on section 1. Now, most people will be familiar with the expression high-pitched or low-pitched. Pitch simply refers to how high or low a sound is in the musical spectrum. Musical notes are drawn on the lines and the spaces between the lines. The higher up the note is placed, the higher the pitch. Now, if all the notes, from the very lowest to the very highest, were assigned a line or a space, it would be very hard to identify which was which, as you can see here. So, to keep things simple, just the lines in the middle of the spectrum are shown, representing the notes that are used the most by the instrument the music is written for. Piano music uses 2 sets of lines. Each set of 5 is known as a musical staff, or in the plural, staves. The upper staff contains the notes normally played by the right hand, and the lower one, the notes usually played by the left hand. Each is identified by a symbol at the beginning of each line, known as a clef sign. The treble clef, which is used for the right hand, shows higher pitched notes and is also used, for instance, by treble voices or the flute or violin. The bass clef, representing lower notes, is used for lower pitched instruments, such as the cello or the double bass, as well as for the left hand of the piano. Now, these lines and spaces are not enough for all the notes on the keyboard, so for extra high notes, small lines are drawn as needed above the treble clef. Conversely, for very low notes, these short lines, known as ledger lines, are inserted as needed below the bass clef. Ledger lines are also used between the 2 staves, so that notes in the middle part of the keyboard may be allocated to the right or to the left hand. To name the notes, the letters A through G are used. After G is reached, the next note starts again at A. All A's, B's, C's, etc. have a similar sound. The interval from one A to the next is known as an octave. Now, let's identify these notes with the piano so that you can play them and hear the different sound relationships. The first and most important note to identify is middle C. Notice that it's at the center of the staves and also at the center of the piano keyboard. You can use this note as a reference point for finding other notes on the keyboard. For instance, try now to find the same note an octave lower. That's the one that's also beside 2 black keys. Now go down 2 more notes, and you arrive at A, which is the note written on the bottom space of the bass clef. You have, of course, many keys below that, but for the moment we're going to relate the most commonly used notes, that's to say the ones on the 2 staves, with their counterparts on the keyboard. Now, as we play up from that low A, and play just the white keys for now, notice how the notes on the keyboard relate to those on the staves, and also how the letter names repeat every 8 notes or octave. Now, in a moment, we're going to use a special method to memorize the notes. So for now, just try to form an overview of this relationship. Now, we read the notes in succession from left to right, just like reading a book. And when notes are placed on top of each other, they're sounded together as a chord. Now's the time for you to start your practical work. I'm going to show you an easy way to memorize the notes on each staff. And when you've done this, you can test your memory with the quiz that follows. Let's start at the bottom. The lines of the bass clef represent the notes G, B, D, F, and A. And the well-known memory aid for this is Great Big Dogs from Africa. Sounds strange, but you'll never forget it. The spaces represent A, C, E, and G, often remembered, again, by the mnemonic, all cows eat grass. Moving to the treble clef, the notes on the lines are E, G, B, D, and F. And the memory aid for that is every good boy does fine. And the spaces represent F, A, C, and E, which spells face and makes this probably the easiest to remember. Now, once you think you have these thoroughly memorized, try the quiz that follows and see if you can name each of the notes before I do. All right, here we go now. And here's the first one. And it's an E. What's that? It's a B, a G, D, up to the treble clef, it's an E, a C, a B, a G, another G, a D, E in the bass clef, a C, and now a tricky one because it's above the staff. See if you can work this one out, and it is a G. We have now covered the names of the notes and where to find them on the piano keyboard. Don't worry about the black keys, we'll get to them very soon. Before that, we're going to learn how long different types of notes are to last, and a way to play them in a measured fashion. All the examples so far have used whole notes. This form of note is the longest that you're likely to encounter in general practice. And here it is on the note C in the treble clef. A note half as long in duration is known, logically, as a half note and looks like this. And a quarter of the length of the whole note, the quarter note, looks like this. And now here are the 8th, 16th, and 32nd notes to complete those in common use. Faster notes can be made by adding extra tails or beams, each extra one halving the value of the note and making it twice as fast. Notice that with the faster notes, single notes have a flag or double flag, and when they're joined together in succession, they are beamed across. Now, if all the successive notes were entered in random fashion, it would be hard to keep track of the time values. So, to make the music simple to count and orderly in appearance to the eye, it's divided off into segments of equal duration known as bars or measures. Each bar represents an equal amount of time and is separated from the next one by a vertical line. The time within the bar is measured by counting. You've perhaps heard the expression 4 to the bar or 8 to the bar, and this is the number of beats or counts, and it's indicated at the beginning of the music like this. The upper number tells you how many beats in the bar, and the lower one tells you the length of each beat. In this case, a quarter note. Now here's a simple chart that explains it. If the lower number is a 2, then each beat is worth a half note. If the lower number is a 4, it's worth a quarter note. If it's an 8, then each beat is worth an eighth note. And if it's a 16, then each beat is worth a 16th note. Now let's try some practical counting to make sense of this. We'll take the commonest time, 4/4, so common that it's often abbreviated to a C, as you see it here at the beginning of the line. 4/4 means that each bar will last the length of time that it takes to play 4 quarter notes. Now in our example here, the whole note that we see in the first bar is going to take the whole bar, so it's going to get 4 counts. Then the 2 half notes that follow will get 2 counts each to complete the 4. Finally, 4 quarter notes, each getting 1 count, and then a whole note again that must last for 4 full counts. Let's try playing it now. I'll count the 4 to give you the time before we start. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 2 each. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 each. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Got the idea? Now let's mix the values up a bit and try counting these out. As soon as you see how the counting goes, try counting and playing the notes at the same time yourself. All right, same thing 4/4 time. Here's the count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Now let's try another one using the bass clef this time to get used to that as well. Are you ready? Find the note D. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, how do we count a note that is shorter than the beat? Let's start with eighth notes that are exactly half as long as our quarter note beat. What we need is something between our main count of 1, 2, 3, and so on to give the time for the faster note. And the usual way that this is done is to insert an and, like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you can see how that effectively doubles the speed. Now here's how it fits with the notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now let's try an example and make sense of this by mixing up quarters and eighths. All right, now you're going to find the C in the bass clef, and we're going to do this in 3/4 time. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2 and 3. 1, 2, and 3. Got the idea? Now to count 16th notes, we use the same principle, we've got to insert another syllable between those we already had for the eighth notes. And this is the usual formula. Between the one and the and, we put the syllable e, and after the and, the syllable a. So it comes out 1 e and a, 2 e and a, 3 e and a, 4 e and a, giving us effectively 4 pulses each time. Here's how it lines up with the 16th notes as you see them on the music. And the count would be this: 1 e and a, 2 e and a, 3 e and a, 4 e and a. All right, that's the theory of it. The important thing now is to try these methods out in practice until this counting becomes easy and automatic. To do this, you'll need to play the following exercises several times. At first, you may want to just watch as I demonstrate. Then it's important that you do it. Finally, turn off the sound and try playing by yourself from the screen in time with the visual count that you will see. All right, here's the first one. And we'll do them all on the same note, and then we'll put a little bit of melody in it. And be ready for the 1 e-ander for the first beat, which is the 4 16th notes. All right, I'm going to give you a slow count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 e-ander, 2 and 3, 4, and 1 e and a 2 and 3 e and a 4. Got the idea? Now let's put a little tune with it. We're only going to use 3 notes, but it makes it just a little less monotonous for practice. Same tempo all the way through. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 e and a 2 and 3, 4, and 1 e and a 2 and 3 e and a 4. Now, let's try something in the bass clef so we don't neglect it. Again, all on the same note, on that C, find it. And here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, E and a 3. Now, let's try that same one and vary the notes just a little bit. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, E and a 3. Now, music is not always continuous, and sometimes we wish to write in moments of silence. We give these silences a time value so that they may be measured and counted in exactly the same way that the notes are. Thus, each note has its equivalent rest, as you can see in this chart. There, for instance, at the beginning is the whole note, and underneath, that black block that you see hanging from the second line down is the sign for the whole note rest. Now, in contrast, when that block is on top of a line, as in the second example, it's the equivalent of a half note rest. And then, as you go through, you see the distinctive sign for the quarter note, then the eighth note that looks a little bit like a 7, and then you gradually add extra symbols of the same kind to make the quicker notes as you go through the 16th and 32nd notes. Now, here's a practical example of counting rests, and let's see if you can do it with me right away. I'll just give a count of 3, and when you see those moments of silence, you just count, but you just take your hand off the note. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We'll have more practice with rests in some of the later tunes. Now let's consider how we can write a note that lasts over from one bar to another. Perhaps the simplest example might be a note that is to last right through 2 complete bars. The answer is very easy. We draw a line joining the note in the first bar to a note in the next bar, in effect tying the two notes together to make one long one. Logically, these signs are known as ties. Now, before leaving the subject of note values, there's one other important item to learn, the dot. A dot after a note or after a rest has the effect of extending it by half its value again. Let's look at an example here. A half note with a dot is worth the same as a half note plus a quarter, and therefore gets 3 counts in 3/4 time. Now, the dotted half note is easy to count in common time, since it just gets the 3 counts. The dotted quarter note is a little harder, but not if we apply what we have learned in connection with counting eighth notes. Let's consider what the value of a dotted quarter note is. Since the dot adds half again, the value is 1½ quarter notes, or in effect, a quarter note plus an eighth note. Now, to count this in common or 3/4 time, let's consider a quarter note followed by 2 eighth notes. In the first example, our count would be 1, 2, and 3, the 2 eighth notes getting the 2 and in the normal way. Now, if we join together the quarter and the eighth, the first eighth there, our count again would be 1, 2, and 3, but we would hold the quarter and the eighth joined together for 1 and then through the count of 2. And finally, if instead of that quarter joined to the eighth, we substitute a dotted quarter note, we have exactly the same count, 1, 2, and 3. Of course, when you hear this in a tune, there's a characteristic lilt to it that you'll very soon recognize, as in this rather familiar melody. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. And there you have your very typical dotted quarter note followed by an eighth. Now, here are some examples of the various types of count that we've studied. After watching and hearing me give the count, try turning down the sound and counting them out yourself, and be sure that you really understand how the counting works, because in the next section, we're going to work on playing and counting a number of tunes. All right, let's try our examples now. The first one in 3/4 time, and we're going to cover the tie in this one, and also a quarter note rest. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Good. Now let's try one with the left hand in the bass clef. Are you ready? Count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Got the idea? The rests get the same amount of time count as the notes do. Now one in the treble clef, and we're going to do an eighth note rest in this that you're going to have to watch out for. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now back to the bass clef. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and a 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Quite tricky, that last one. Our next step is a very practical one. The tunes that follow are probably familiar, and you'll quickly be able to play them. However, I want you to keep counting out the note values so that when you reach the last tune, which is not familiar, you'll be able to work it out correctly. As before, I suggest you have a try at all the tunes before rewinding for the next attempt. By the way, to establish where the first beat of any bar is, we give it a slight extra stress. Now let's start with a very straightforward tune that begins on the first beat. I'll count 3 beats before you begin to give you a feel for the time. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Three. Note the 2 long notes joined together as you just learned by the tie. All right, here's the next tune coming up. Familiar, I'm sure. 1, 2, 3. Now you'll find that many tunes don't start on the first beat of the bar. In this example, you'll see there's only 1 note before the bar line, and that means it must be the last beat of an incomplete beginning bar. You'll notice that a tune that starts on the 4th beat of an incomplete bar will end on the 3rd beat in its final bar, which will also be incomplete. And what this really means is that the beats in the first bar and the beats in the last bar are going to add up to make one complete one. Let's play the example and you'll see what I mean. Here's the opening part. I'm going to count 3 and you have to come in on the 4th beat. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I'm sure that's a tune you know. Now, what we're going to do is to play just the very last part of it, and you'll see how we're going to end, in fact, with an incomplete bar of 3 counts, which with the beginning one would make up the total of 4. All right, let's play together now the last part. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now for the unknown tune, and let's see if you can manage this by yourselves. I'll just give you a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Up to now, all our counting has been in quarter notes, because the lower figure of the fraction was a 4. Now what happens when the lower figure has a different value? Here's a reminder of the relationship between the lower figure and our unit of counting. If the lower figure is a 2, then each beat gets a half note value. If the lower figure is 4, then we're counting as before in quarter notes. If the lower figure is an 8, then we're counting in 1/8 notes, and if the lower figure is a 16th, then again each beat is worth a 16th note. Now to make sense of this, let's try an example quickly in 3/8 time. The 3 tells us that there are 3 beats to the bar, and the 8 tells us that each beat is worth an 1/8 note. And notice that we use the same device to split the beat, and the same formula for the dotted note as we did before. Here's how it sounds now. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. No problem there, I think. Now let's look at 6/8 time. This is a particularly interesting time signature because it involves stresses on the first and fourth beats, which effectively makes it into two groups of three. The two groups are in fact beamed together, which makes them easy to spot. And here is how the time would go. I'm going to give a slight stress on 4 as well as on 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, and 3. 4, 5, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, because there are two groups in each bar, there's a feeling of 2 as well as of 6. This is known as compound time, since in a sense two rhythms are compounded together. For this reason, other time signatures that involve groups of 3 are also considered compound time. Common examples are 9/8 and 12/8, which contain 3 groups and 4 groups respectively. Now let's play some examples in varied time signatures. The first one is going to be in 3/2 time, and that means that there are 3 half-note counts in the bar. So you just get a count of 3 to start. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Notice that the whole note with its dot was half as much again as a normal whole note would be, and so it was as long, in fact, as 3 half notes. Let's try one in the bass clef now, in 2/2 time, theme actually by Purcell. Ready? 1, 2. 1 and 2 and 1, 2 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2. Notice again I'm using the AND device to split the beat. Now another tune, not by Purcell but arranged by him. He called it an old Irish tune, Lily Bolero. And here's how it goes in 3/8 time. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. And finally, 6/8, remembering to make the slight stress on 1 and 4. And this is a tune called The Wood So Wild that was beautifully arranged by William Byrd. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, and 3. 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we come to the subject of sharps and flats, and to the black notes on the keyboard. A sharp sign simply means play the next key up from this note. So if I see the note C with a sharp beside it, instead of C, I play the note 1 key up, which is the black key, in fact, next to it. Now, when we include all the notes, both black and white, the interval from each one to the next is a half tone, and it's known also as a semitone. So a sharp sign means play the note a half tone or semitone higher than this one. So if I see the note F with a sharp beside it, I must go up a semitone to the next key above, from F to F sharp. A flat means exactly the opposite. That's to say, play the note a half step lower than this one. So here, instead of B, I must play B flat, which is the black key below it. So the black keys can actually have two names. C sharp is the black key above C, but that same key is also the note a semitone down from D, or D flat. Now, which name is used is a matter of music theory, which is beyond the scope of this introductory program. For now, let's concentrate on the practical side of how to read these indications. Now, sharps or flats at the beginning of a line affect all occurrences of those notes throughout a piece, whatever octave they may be in. The indication is known as a key signature because it establishes the set of notes, or key, that is to be used for the piece. When used on an occasional basis, sharps and flats are called accidentals, which is rather easy to remember. Accidentals apply to notes of that letter name for the remainder of the bar therein, unless otherwise cancelled by a natural sign, which you'll see in a moment. A bar line automatically cancels accidentals. Let's play some examples now, which will help to make sense of these rules. We'll also be using both hands, although not yet together. All right, first of all, find the G with the left hand. And we're going to play up a succession of notes, having noticed that at the beginning of the line, there is an indication of an F sharp, which means that all the Fs we encounter must be played sharp. Now see if you can get this right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I hope you played that F sharp. Right. Now, in the next example, we have a flat in the key signature, and this tells us that every time we encounter the note B, we're going to play it flat. Now, we've got some other things to look out for here, because we've got a natural sign, and then we've got a flat sign that, in effect, negatives that natural sign that came before it. Let's play the notes now. Count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there you have your example of the natural sign as well as the flat. Now an example that is going to have, again, a key signature and an accidental. And this time you'll probably recognize the tune. Are you ready? I'll just give you, since it's a 9/8, it's a long count, I'll just give you 7, 8, 9 to bring you in. 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Good. Now, one final example, more of a challenge. You see 3 sharps in the key signature at the beginning, meaning that every time you encounter either an F or a C or a G, you're going to play them sharp. All right, let's go rather slowly on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Good. Up to this point, all our examples have involved a single musical line so that we could concentrate on basics. We should now look at some music involving more than one line so as to be sure there are no problems understanding the notation. Any two or more notes played simultaneously are known as a chord. This is a chord, and so is this. Now, when chords are played in succession with the same time value, reading is obviously very simple. Here we just count 1, 2, 3, 4 in the usual way, playing a chord on each beat. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, but what if the notes have different time values like this? When the music moves like this, we often consider the individual musical lines as voices. We also use the term counterpoint, which simply means one voice or line moving against another, from the old term punctus, or point for a note. In this case, the upper voice sings 4 notes each on the beat, and the lower voice sings 2 notes lasting 2 beats each. To count the 2 lines, think first of the faster moving voice, here the upper one. If we count and play it correctly, all we have to remember with the lower voice is to hold the notes on so that they sustain for their full value. Let's look at it beat by beat. Now, on the first beat, play both notes. I suggest using the thumb and middle finger of the right hand. On the second beat, play the upper note while leaving the lower note on. On the third beat, play both together again, and on the fourth beat, play the upper note while leaving the lower note on. Let's do it once more up to time. Here's the account. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Now let's move the lower voice down into the left-hand range and try a similar example using both hands. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Now let's try varying the melody a little bit in the upper voice. Do the same thing as far as time is concerned. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Now we're well on the way to reading music with both hands. Now let's try a complete 8-bar melody with bass as well. You'll see an occasional number beside the notes which indicate fingering, and here's what the numbers mean. A number 1 means the thumb, number 2 for the index finger, 3 for the middle finger, 4 for the ring finger, and 5 for the little finger. Now let's have a slow run through. You may wish to work on the right or left hand individually before you put the two together. Slow count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Before we play our final piece, let's consider some important indications for tempo, which is how fast we're to play, and dynamics, which is how loud or soft. The commonest tempo indications are these. Lento means very slow. Largo, very slow, and it also means broad. Adagio, slow. Andante means walking pace. And andantino, just a little bit faster. A brisker walk, if you like. Allegretto means moderately fast. It's a diminutive, in fact, of allegro, which is your basic word for fast, and it also means cheerful. Vivace means very fast, and it has a sense of liveliness to it. Presto, again, very fast. Rallentando is a term for slowing down, very often abbreviated to just rall with a full stop after it. And accelerando, or ACC, for speeding up. The dynamic signs are very easy to learn, because if you know P for piano and F for forte, meaning respectively soft and loud, then that's half the battle. The term M mezzo for moderately can be used with either of them. So mezzo forte means moderately loud. The initials of the letters can be doubled up. PP for pianissimo, or very soft, FF for fortissimo, very loud. Now, for growing in volume, we have the term crescendo, and its opposite, diminuendo, diminishing in sound. There are, in fact, many other Italian words that you'll come across, and frankly, the best way to learn them is to look them up each time you encounter a new one. Now, to conclude the practical part of our lesson, let's play through an arrangement from the Bach cantata, Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, as an example of how musically satisfying even two lines of music can be. As before, you'll probably want to try the left hand and right hands separately before putting them together. Now, the piece is in 9/8 time. I'll give you a moderate count of 9, and then you come in. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The sign you notice at the end is called a fermata, or pause sign, and because it's the end of the piece, you hold the note just a little longer than its real value. Well done. Now, let's look at some publications to help you go on to the next stage of your music reading. First of all, I'd like to point out this book by Helen Cooper, The Basic Guide to How to Read Music. It's an excellent book. It covers much of what we've done today, but it also fills in a lot of the corners that we didn't have time for. It'll tell you a lot about keys and scales and intervals and other things that you need to know. Now, of course, there are many piano books on the market that certainly in their elementary stages will tell you a good deal about reading music and give you simple examples. And at this stage, obviously, you want fairly easy examples if you can find them. But the other thing I'd like to emphasize is that you go with your own preference, because if you do that, you're much more likely to do the playing and the practicing that will take you on. For instance, if you really happen to like Mozart, then pick a book, this one, The Joy of Mozart, a typical example, where you'll find quite a lot of simple tunes as well as difficult ones, and by following your own pleasure, you'll in fact learn a lot. If your taste goes more to popular solos, then of course there are many of those available too. Now, there's just one more thought I'd like to leave with you, though it's possibly the most important of all. I've tried to get you started in reading music, but what's really going to make the difference is what you do. If you can manage to read one little piece of music, even if it be one line, every day, then in a year from now, you'll be absolutely amazed at how good a reader you can be. So it only remains for me to say good luck and to wish you every success.